Tamara, Matilda, and Elle have only appeared in 3 videos, yet they are still beloved icons in the Eddsworld fanbase. Ever since their grand reveal in Mirror Mirror, these 3 ladies have paved the way for a mountain of fan art and cosplay, and that was almost by accident. Tom, Matt, and Eddie never planned to write a gender-swapped Eddsworld episode, but upon seeing Paul Tevorda's wonderful designs, they knew they just had to build an episode around them. Unlike the neighbours who live next door and are just evil versions of Ed and his friends, the Ellsworld crew were written to exist in a parallel universe where everything is opposite. Kinda. The girls are obviously girls, but they are still the good guys. Well, come to think of it, I'm not so sure. It's not just the boys who are different in the parallel universe. Almost everything is slightly out of the ordinary. Instead of the character Paul, there is Sandra, who's based on the person who animated Mirror Mirror. Instead of Tommy Bear, there's this little guy who, from what I can tell, doesn't have a name yet. And one of my favourite differences is Tequila the house cat. Ringo is the house cat in the Eddsworld universe, and she was based on one of Ed's actual pets of the same name. Ringo had a pseudo-sister and frenemy named Tequila, but sadly both of them are no longer with us. So when it came around to giving the girls their own pet, Tequila was also immortalized in adorable cartoon form. Also, apparently the girls live in a nuclear post-apocalypse where atomic warfare has plunged the world into eternal winter.
Yes, nuclear winter really helps with global warming.
So that's fun. Unlike other character staples, the Ellsworld girls have only been around for a few episodes, so there isn't really much interesting to say about each of the characters, especially when they are so similar to the main boys. You could argue that Tamara is slightly less apathetic than Tom, or Matilda is maybe a little smarter than Matt. It's kinda up to interpretation. I think it's almost more interesting to learn about the characters' voice actors. Elle is Ed's analog, wearing green and drinking cherry cola, and she has the perfect voice actor. Vicky Gould is, as you might have guessed, the sister of both Ed and George Gould, who've each taken turns voicing Ed's character. She's also a board member who helps oversee Eddsworld production along with the rest of the Gould family. Outside of the episodes, Vicky has a second life as a drag king, dressing up as a man and taking on the persona of Mr. Party. You can find Mr. Party appearing at drag shows, performing songs that are not necessarily appropriate for kids, and he's even appeared on BBC News. That's pretty awesome. Surprisingly enough, Elle is the only member of the Ellsworld crew who's been voiced by the same actor since her introduction. Tamara, for instance, is Tom's analog, and just like Tom, she dresses in blue and seems to have an affinity for checkerboard patterns. Also, possibly by sheer coincidence, she has her own little catchphrase to complement Tom's holy lines.
No. Nuts!
Tamara has been voiced by 2 actors across her 2 incarnations. In the Legacy era, she was voiced by Chloe Dungate, a very talented artist and content creator, and whenever she's on the mic, she is genuinely hilarious. Chloe is well known for her collaborations with friends across YouTube, and I am not at all surprised that she was chosen to play the female version of Tom. She's amazing at balancing that deadpan delivery and wacky expressiveness required for the character. In Eddsworld Beyond, however, Tamara is voiced by Rachel Kiki. Kiki is a professional photographer with loads of credits from a bunch of prestigious organisations, but they still make sure to list Eddsworld right in their Instagram bio. Needless to say, they also really embody Tamara's energy and were a great choice as a replacement. Finally, there's Matilda, who's a female version of Matt. You can tell because she somehow appears on the wall in Matt's bedroom. She's also the only character to wear a short sleeve hoodie, and is the person who bought the mirror that connects the 2 worlds. Typical that Matt would be the one to break it. She was originally brought to life by Alice Ann Stacey, who you'd probably recognise from her work with Tom Scar, voicing Lucy and Kate in Crash Zoom, though she does have a few other credits on IMDb. In the Beyond era, she's voiced by Jennifer Bingham, and if that last name rings any bells, then it's because her brother is Christopher Bingham, who until recently was Eddsworld's producer and occasional voice actor. Jen is also a content creator, making videos about tabletop games, and just like Alice does a great job of capturing Matilda's bubbly and chaotic demeanour. So all 3 girls have pretty awesome voice actors. But there is another. There is one other girl who does not have a voice. It's Tori. I'm going to talk about Tori now. As the female version of Tord, Tori has appeared twice in the show. Once in Mirror Mirror in an out-of-frame photo that's hung 2 inches above the floor, and once in Fun Dead as a zombie. She has been mentioned a couple of times outside of the show though. Last year we got this wonderful illustration of Tori, where she is a backpacking world traveller who is still on good terms with the other girls. Those pins also look a lot like the Eddsworld boys. Maybe she's also traveling between dimensions, I don't know. She also gets a mention in this little comic where she invited Elle on her fishing trip. Not Matilda though, too much emotional baggage. I'm honestly thrilled that this is what they did with the character. I think that this is a wonderful send-off to a cult favourite character that also continues the theme of being opposite to the boys' world. Where Tord turns evil and doesn't care for the boys, Tori goes off on her own adventure with the girls on the back of her mind. I think it's fair to say that the ending of The End was a controversial one. Lots of people were sad that the boys never became friends again, and if Tori is going to be written out of the show, I think that this is the best way to do it. Like I say, Ellsworld isn't really that fleshed out, so there is no incarnation of the girls as neighbours or cowgirls or cowgirl neighbours, at least not officially. Also, unlike any of those incarnations, Ellsworld exists completely separate to Eddsworld, so its characters have never met beyond that one brief moment at the end of Mirror Mirror, and they close that door for good. But should they have closed that door? Should Eddsworld and Ellsworld ever meet? If you ask me, absolutely not. To be upfront, this is just my opinion. Maybe I'm in the minority. But I was swayed when I saw Eddie Bowley's take on why they didn't want Mirror Mirror to be a crossover episode. Eddie does not work on Eddsworld anymore. His opinions do not reflect current management of the show. But he helped write Mirror Mirror with Matt and Tom, and I do think that it's a convincing argument against a crossover in this context. Like I said, Mirror Mirror only exists because they really liked the character designs and wanted to create an episode around them. But if you're a writer tasked with making a 2-minute cartoon with a premise male character but female, what exactly are you supposed to do? If the boys were changed into women or met female doppelgangers, then the plot and jokes would logically have to be about them being women. That's a direct quote from the writer, by the way, and I think I agree. I'm no longer sure that that kind of story can be done well with Eddsworld. I know what I said! If the boys and girls were to meet, then they couldn't be exactly the same, or that'd be kinda boring. We also had our fill of clone jokes in spares, and that did not end well for about 4 million of them. They could have been written to be polar opposites, but at that point you kinda just have the neighbours, which would be redundant. Literally, the only difference then between these characters is gender. So given that, what are your options? You could do a battle of the sexes, which is rarely fun or funny, and you'd have to turn your characters into annoying pigs before they learn basic lessons that don't reflect actual systemic problems. You could make the characters date one another, which would be kinda weird, or you could have some kind of role reversal where the boys do girly things or get emasculated or whatever. It's been done, and in my opinion, it's rarely ever done well. In stories about the differences between men and women, not stories about societal injustices, just the ones about stereotypes. Writers always pretend that boys and girls are basically different species. Boys like video games and sports, girls like shopping and gossip, that kind of stuff. And even if the ultimate message is that these gender norms are stupid, the characters always start from a base of this is what's normal. Ignoring the fact that almost everything we think of as dichotomous is in fact spectral, why do we need more media that affirms those gender norms? Men and women tend to act differently because of social constructs that formed over millennia, but the weird tribalism mentality that young boys and girls have is ultimately kinda dumb, and I fail to see why there are so many cartoons that put fuel on that fire. To be entirely fair, this kind of story can be done well. There are stories that deconstruct the boxes that we place ourselves into, address failings in the social order that create inequity, highlight the pressures that cause us to build walls between us, and have the characters look beyond stereotypes, embracing what makes them different while not letting those differences define them. But Eddsworld is a short-form comedy web cartoon. That's not what we're doing here, you can't make an episode out of that. Oh right, this is an Eddsworld video. So the writers didn't want to make an episode about the differences in gender binaries. They wanted to treat the boys and girls the same. So, inspired by Fiona and Cake episodes of Adventure Time, they wrote a parallel universe episode about opposites. Again, spectrum's not binaries, genies are not the opposite of donuts, you get the idea, it's a very loose theme. But in doing so, the team introduced some female characters to a series that didn't really have a lot of representation for that half of the fanbase. And I want to stress that there is nothing inherently wrong with that. Women are allowed to love male-led stories just as much as men are allowed to love female ones, obviously. If you're just here for the boys, then that's pretty swell, and I'm not going to take that away from you. I just think that more realistic representation is always lovely to see. It paves the way for more stories that couldn't be told otherwise, and can help a fanbase or population feel a little bit more included in the conversation. Also, if demanding the world adhere to strict binaries creates tribalism, then maybe suggesting a world where differences aren't so bad might help some people be more tolerant. That's just my theory. By legitimizing gender-switched versions of the main cast, giving them official names and designs and personalities, millions of people now have one more way to express themselves. And that can only be a good thing.
It's pretty swell. It's pretty swell. It's pretty swell.